Last thing we were talking about the issue of stoking the coals, and that was a big concern. Mr. Haber, he's gonna make it. Okay. Um, and
Gotta bring down a little bit. You only see the top of your head.
thank you very much, bro.
That's good. That's good.
Thank you very much. So the Gemara says 18b2. Now that the master said, Mr. Haber, if you want to sit over here, now that the master said, Zera Shemeyachte B'Chalim, we have it, Adam, on the right, on the left side, bottom of 18b2. Now that you told me that there's a concern of stoking the coals, so Hai Kedera Hayata, we said if you have a raw pot of meat, raw food, Shari La Nucheir Shabbat Im Chasecha B'Tanura. Since the meat take us long time, meat, you want sugar, Mr. Haber, or no sugar? No, he's very close. Thank you, Nathan.
No problem.
So because the meat won't be ready for it's not gonna be ready for the night, it'll be ready in the morning. So therefore, you're not gonna stoke the coals. You're not afraid that Friday night you're gonna stoke the coals. My 18b2 on the right top. My time, since it's not ready for the night, you lose focus, you're not focused on it, you're not thinking about it. And right, Adam? He's not going to come to stir it because I'm not going to use it tonight because it's not going to be ready to taste it for tomorrow morning, for Saturday morning. Now the Gemara says the following: Ubashil, what happens? The Gemara says if you have a pot of cooked food, if the pot is completely cooked. So now, he says you could put it onto the fire before Shabbat. That's true, but there's a different. The question here is whether we're afraid that you're going to come to stoke the coals on Shabbat, which is the problem of making a fire. We should also be making a fire, and the Gemara says it's not a problem. Why is it not a problem? But if it's full now, so now the way Rashi learns that we're talking about a pot of food that's fully cooked. So if it's fully cooked and you put on the fire before Shabbat, you're not going to come stoke the coals, right? Adam, do you need to stoke the coals if it's already cooked? It's not, you don't have to worry about it. You put on the fire, so you're good. Now, Bishul,
Rabbi,
yes.
We don't have coals anymore. That's we put it in an oven and there's no coals to stoke.
Good morning. Right. Good morning. Yes, and here the oven. Maybe we have the problem. Morning, Simon is back and better than ever. Yeah. Will we right, Simon? Will we have knobs to turn up the
Okay, that's different.
Now, that could be turning up the fire. That's also making it higher. Or you look at the knobs on the top of a stovetop.
Yeah.
Those are the knobs. That's the coal, so to speak. So we might come to
different terminology.
Yes. Good morning, Ronnie. Now, then the Gemara says, now we're going to see later on, we're going to learn about Hananya later on, that he's going to allow you to leave food if it's already a third cooked or a half cooked. That's called Michael Ben Dersoy. Right, because thieves would eat food that's already edible, very rare. It's the food is not ready yet, but they would eat food that's already a third cooked or a half cooked, and therefore, if it reached that amount of cooking, he's of the opinion that you don't have to worry that maybe he's going to stir it because people will eat this food in that state. There are people. Rashi here goes like the opinions that argue on Hananya and say that until a food is fully cooked, we're afraid that you might come to stir it. And that's where Rashi goes with that opinion. And as we'll learn that Gemara when we get there, We'll go more into the halacha exactly. But here, the way we'll go with the Rashi's shot, that if you put up food that's fully cooked before Shabbat, you're good. You're not going to stoke the coals. You're not going to turn on the knob, make the fire higher because it's already reached full cooking. Now, ubashil velo bashil asur, but food that started to cook, it's not fully cooked, or according to the other opinion, it's not half cooked or third cooked. So if you're going to put that food up before Shabbat, you put it up an hour before Shabbat, and so what's the fear is maybe you're going to come to stoke the coals to get it ready faster. The ish should be garma, but if you throw in a meat, you throw in some meat into you put a bone that's not cooked at all, then there's no pshapet dami. Then it's not going to be ready until the next day. That's just like throwing in, you just like putting in meaning even if you added a bone to the pot that's raw, so it's obviously you're not gonna eat it until the next day, till the next morning, and because that. Most probably, if it's just on and off, it's probably better because there's no real adjusting to do. Now, so therefore, if you threw in a raw bone into the pot, let's say the pot started cooking before Shabbat. I mean, you didn't just put it right before Shabbat. The food could have been ready for Friday night. And we say there's a concern you might come to stoke the coals. But if you did something, you added a raw bone to that pot, and the type of people in those days, if you added a raw bone, you're not going to start taking something out from it Friday night and use it Friday night and Shabbat day. So therefore, that shows you're not going to use it to the next day. And therefore, you're good. Now, but the rabbi, the master said earlier, Kol midi dekashi le zika lo megalele. If something is found in an oven, and if you would open the oven before the item is completely, whatever you're doing there, the process is completed. If you open up before the completion of the process, the item would get hurt by it, get ruined by it, or deficient, because the wind will have a bad effect on the item. So, and we said, being that's the case, you're not afraid that you're going to go ahead and open the oven, like we spoke about the bundle of flax that you place into the oven, and you want the heat of the oven to whiten the flax. We're not afraid you're going to open the oven. The Gemara says, how are you allowed to put it in the oven before Shabbat? Point to Beit Hillel, maybe you're going to go ahead and stoke the coals, right? So the Gemara says the draft would hurt the bundle of flax, and therefore you will not open it up while the fire is during that process. So the Gemara says, and now with that being said, Hi Bisa de Gadya, the meat of a kid goat, which is very soft and tender, and the wind would have a negative effect if you open the oven while you're cooking, while you're roasting this, while you're making this meat. And not only that, ushrik. And if the Gemara is now saying a second point, and you sealed the oven, not only in the oven and opening the oven would go ahead and have a detrimental effect on the flax, the wind, but you also did something else. You actually sealed the oven. Let's say you put some mud around, whatever you call it, certain clay around it to keep the oven closed. So shapidami, that would not be a problem to put it in before Shabbat, because you're not going to go ahead and touch it. You're not going to go ahead and touch it during the process, during the cooking process, because why won't you touch it? Because if you open it during the process, what are you afraid? You're going to come stoke the coals? But if you open it up, the wind will have a negative effect on the item. And not only that, you have a second protection, because the fact that you would have to break the seal of the oven, and it's not something like, sometimes you go to a stove, the pot is directly on the fire, It's a 1 second thing. You might stoke it. But here, where you have to go through removing the clay that's closed, whatever's keeping the seal of the oven, so that by that time you'll already catch yourself. You'll more catch yourself. You'll have an extra reason to catch yourself because of this process of removing the seal of the oven. Therefore, you'll remind yourself, hey, I can't do that because it's Shabbat. So there's two things going on here that's going to, in your favor, why it should be permitted. Therefore, the rabbis, when there's two positive things, the rabbis do not feel the necessity to make a decree that maybe you're going to come stoke the coals in such a situation. Now, the barcha, if you have meat from a ram, a very mature, large-sized ram, where the meat is not tender, it is tougher meat, the wind does not have a negative effect on it. So then, if the lo sharik, and it's in an oven that's not sealed, it's just an oven that you just have to just open the oven, so asur. You're not allowed to go ahead and put ram meat in the oven before Shabbat because we're concerned you're going to go in and stoke the coals. So when we have two positives, there's no problem. When we have two negatives, there's the problem, right? Those two cases where either, again, if it's tender goat meat, there's two positives on your favor that it won't be a problem. One is if you open it up, it would damage it would have a detrimental on the tender meat. The wind will have it will affect it in a negative way. And number two, you seal the oven. If you seal the oven, therefore we're not afraid. There's reason to say you'll catch yourself. Since it takes a large effort to get to stoke the coals, you'll catch yourself. You remind yourself. You won't come to open it up. Also, the fact that you sealed it with something that shows you that you're not looking so much to open it up. And if it's two negatives, let's say if it's ram meat, which is not tender and the wind will not affect it, and you didn't seal it, you have two things going in the negative, so therefore it's easy to stoke such a thing. However, what about if you only have one positive and one negative, so to speak? Only one reason why we should be allowed. The gadya v'lo sharik. If it's a tender goat meat, and therefore the wind will affect it in a negative way, because you're not going to open it up, but it's not sealed. So it's close to being open, but has one positive thing going for it that you will hopefully stay away from opening it because you don't want the wind, the draft, as Nathan said, to have a negative effect on that tender meat. Or the barach of the sharik. What about if you have the mature ram meat, which is tough meat, not affected negatively by the wind, by the drift, but you sealed it with the clay around the oven. So therefore, there's one thing one thing showing you're not going to open it, and one thing that's not holding you back. So there, the Gemara says we have a machlokes, an argument. Rav Ashi Shari. Rav Ashi says as long as you got one thing going for you that you're not going to do it, but either the meat is tender and you're not going to, there's something that's holding you back from opening it because it might have a negative effect on the meat, the draft, or even if it's not tender, but if you sealed it, that's going to prevent you from opening it. So he said that's fine, sure. However, Yirmiyah Medifti, from Difti, he disagrees. He said, oh, sir, it's forbidden. You have to have, if you only have one thing in the positive, where the rabbis will still be concerned if in this situation that there'll be a problem. Now the Gemara says, what do you Rav Ashi the Shari? Rav Ashi says that it's permitted, that he said it is permitted to roast meat in an oven that's open, that's not sealed, that's just not sealed with clay, just closed oven, because the wind would have a negative effect. If you're not to be afraid you're going to open the oven, but that's not. We learned in the Mishnah later on. Ein solim basel beitza ela kadesh yislim bod yom. If you want to roast meat, if you want to roast the onion or the egg, you have to do it in a way that it's going to be, the process will be completely finished before Shabbat. Now, the Gemara is thinking, it says you can't roast meat. Doesn't make a distinction between goat meat, ram meat. Why? Even if it's goat meat, why shouldn't you be able to roast it in the oven? Because if you open the oven, what are you afraid you're gonna stoke the coals? But if you open the oven, it's gonna have a negative effect on the meat, on the kids' goat meat. And yet we say you can't roast meat, period. We don't make a distinction, which seems to indicate the fact that you have one thing in the positive, that if you open the oven, it would have a negative effect on the meat. We're still concerned you might come to what? Open the oven and stoke the coals. And therefore you would have to require both the seal. You would have to have also the oven sealed and the fact that it's tender. The Gemara says, you know what? He's going to explain that Mishnah which says you can't roast meat at specific certain meat. That's mature ram. That's ram meat, where we have two things are on the negative. Number one, the wind does not affect it in a negative way, and number two, it's not sealed. So velo sharik, and it's not sealed. Therefore, that's why it's asa. But if you would have one thing in your favor, if you have one thing that's showing you that's going to tell us, that indicate to us, an indicator that you're not going to open the oven or you're not going to stoke it, that would be, according to Rav Ashi, that would be good enough. So either the fact that the wind would be detrimental, would that be enough of a deterrent for you to open up, even if it's not sealed with clay, the oven, or if it's sealed with clay, even when it will not be detrimental opening up the oven, that in itself will be enough. That's enough to tell us not to be concerned, that the rabbis will not be concerned and not make a zera. That is his opinion. It looks like the opinion, we'll see further. Let's see how the Gemara says. The Gemara brings a different version on this discussion of Rav Ashi and Rav Yirmiyah. What is the case? What are they arguing? The gadia, if it's tender goat meat, Adam, is it clear? The gadia, bein sharik, bein lo sharik, shabedami. If it's tender goat meat, it doesn't make a difference whether the oven, Simon, is sealed with clay and hard to open up, or whether it's not sealed with clay. The fact is, if you open the oven, the draft will have a negative effect on the goat's meat. You don't have to worry. Shapedami. The barchanami, if it's mature ram meat, with the draft doesn't bother it. But if you shrik shabedami, but if it's sealed with clay around the walls of the oven, the door of the oven, you have clay there, real good seal, you're also good. Meaning the Gemara is now saying, if you have if you have even one positive, one indicator, that's enough. You don't have to worry. The rabbis won't be worried. Remember, perhaps you could say, according to this understanding, is the whole, on a Torah level, there's no problem to put the food in the oven, right? There's no problem before Shabbat. Because why? I didn't do anything on Shabbat. But the concern is I might come to stoke. There's a rabbinic concern that I might come to violate the Torah's law by making fire, by stoking, or hastening the cooking, might be violating cooking as well. But that rabbinic concern was only when there was no indicator. But that the rabbi should create a fence when there is already an indicator that things will be all right. That this opinion says, as long as you have one indicator, you're good. Mr. Haber, is that clear? But now, so where is the argument? You know where they're arguing? Keep pligi. Mr. Haber, is the chair comfortable or not? Good, the chair? Keep pligi. Baracha velo shrik. When you have the mature ram meat, and it's not even sealed. The oven is not sealed. So you would say, what do you mean? You have two things going in the negative. You have no indicator helping you. There's nothing stopping you from opening the oven, because why not? Because the wind will not be detrimental to the ram's meat, and you didn't seal the door of the oven with a clay or something that will hopefully prevent it from opening it up. The Gemara is, but one opinion holds that we're going to see, since it's covered, it's inside the oven, it's inside the oven, the door closes, you don't see it, and you would have to open the door of the oven in order for you to stoke it. He's not afraid as much you're going to come to do that. When something's on an open fire, and you're walking by, you just see something, you touch it. But when it's not even in your view, because what's inside the oven, he's not concerned. Keep pligi, Rav Ashi Shari of Yimi Difti Asir. In that case, when you don't have any help in helping you not to stir it, that's where there's an argument between Rav Ashi and Rav Yemia. And even in such a case, Rav Ashi was lenient. Now, so the Gemara now challenges Rav Ashi. Now, if you're telling me that if it's on, you're telling me that even when you do not have the door of the oven is not sealed with some clay, even when the wind is not detrimental, right? You're telling me it's permitted. So now, if that's the case, what do you mean? Vatnan, we learned in the Mishnah later on, Ein solin basar batzel ubeitza ela kadesh yisil bod yom. If you want to roast meat, you want to have some good meat for Shabbat, right? On Shabbat, you have some good meat, right, Simon? You want to have some good meat, it says you have to make sure it's roasted before Shabbat. But why? According to what the rabbi just said, according to Rav Ashi said, there's no problem. He's not afraid of the stoke. He said that you could even have the ram meat and it still would be permitted. Even though, and he's not afraid of the stoking of the coals. So the Gemara says, you know why he's not afraid? There's two different cases. There's a difference between meat being on an open fire or meat being in an oven. The case of course, Rav Ashi agrees that there's a concern. There's something called Shema Yachteh B'Chalim. There's something called maybe you're going to stoke the coals. But the only time he's afraid that maybe you're going to come stoke the coals is only Hasam B'Bisra Agumri. The Mishnah states that it's a problem. When the Mishnah states that it's a problem, the Mishnah is saying that's talking about roasting on coals outside the oven. Like Good Morning Solomon, like you go ahead and you have like a nice little bonfire with a barbecue, whatever you right, you have the coals, you have one of these ready to make, you buy these little barbecues, outdoor barbecues, right? Disposable, right? Manga, that's what it's called. So these disposable barbecues, it's not in an oven. It's exposed. The food is up. You put the food right on top put the burgers right on top of the coals. You might come to stoke the coals. So Rav Ashi would agree in that case. But when you have to go ahead and actually open a door of an oven to go ahead and then the coals are inside the oven, he's not afraid that that you make that level of mistake on Shabbat. You ever see food on top of a stove? A lot of times, people who want to watch their diets don't leave food out. If the food is left out, watch out. They see it out on the counter and they eat it, right? But if they have to make the move to go into the refrigerator to take something out onto the cloud, that requires more effort, and they'll control themselves. They won't come. But when they see the food left over from the dinner and it's the top of the stove, it's right there. They just go ahead and they might take it. Of course, they say a nice bracha, right, before they say take it. But that's the issue here also in a certain sense. If the coals are exposed, the food is on the fire, it's exposed. There's nothing between you and the fire. Therefore he's afraid you're going to stoke the coals. However, when the food is in the oven and the coals are in the oven, you have to open that oven door on Shabbat to stoke the coals. To do that type of, you're gonna catch yourself. It's not like a second thing you just put a poke at. You have to do a more long. That's his opinion. However, the other rabbi says that also wouldn't be good.
We have another issue. The stove sometimes has a light in it, so when you open it up, the light comes on.
Right. So those stoves would be a problem, right? But let's say meanwhile we've been talking. Let's say right, correct, yes. This is Rav Ashi's opinion, right?
The box cover, or it's the kind of meat you wouldn't want to
Stoke,
stoke anyway.
right. Correct. But now, because you have, as long as you have, because right, he says, if you have, see, the question would be, like you said, logically, if it would be, if the food would be outside if it will be detrimental, you wouldn't stoke it. If your action will be detrimental to it, you wouldn't stoke it. Now, so the Gemara says, Amar Ravina, Hai Kara Chaya. If you have, let's say, kara is like squash, and let's say it's raw squash, could you put it into the oven before Shabbat? So the question is, so the Gemara is saying, because the Gemara says the wind is detrimental for the squash. So because the wind, the Gemara says, good morning, Charles. Good morning, everybody. Kivan the kashele zika, since the wind would have a detrimental effect on the squash during your cooking of the squash while it's in the oven. So the Gemara says, kibisra de gadyadami. It's just like the food of the goat, right? The goat, we said, if the wind, because the wind has a negative effect on the meat of the tender, soft meat, therefore we don't have to be afraid. There's no problem by putting in the oven before Shabbat, because you're not afraid you're going to go to open that oven. So too, he says over here, the same thing would be with the squash, that you don't have to be afraid that you're going to go ahead and stoke the coals of the squash, because to get to the coals, you got to open the oven, and you open the oven, that draft coming in would have a negative effect. Now, let's take a look at the Rashi. To look at the Rashi, Hai Kedera Chayata Shaptadami, which the Rashi is in the middle of the page. Rashi says, with that, Rashi's going on the pot, the raw pot of meat food that you put up late Friday afternoon, that we say, since it's not going to be ready Friday night, you're cooking it for Shabbat day, so that's fine. That's good. Well, what does Rashi say? You can leave it. You have a right to leave it, because there's certain foods, as we know, you can't put on the fire before Shabbat, because you might come to stoke it, might come to play around with the knob. You might raise the temperature. However, this food, you're allowed to go ahead and do it. It's cooking the whole night. But again, I'm not doing the cooking. My action was done before Shabbat. I put in before Shabbat. The vada chayata, if you put this raw meat in the oven before Shabbat, lava daite lemechal utar an chasham. It's definitely clear you don't plan on eating it Friday night, because it wouldn't be ready Friday night. So you put in this pot of meat late Friday afternoon. It's obviously you did it for tomorrow. Umishum lamacha. Now you say, okay, I'm going to be using this meat tomorrow, so maybe I'm going to stoke it Friday night to have it ready for tomorrow. But it doesn't need my stoking Friday night. There's enough hours in the night that in itself is going to cook enough without me getting involved. Because of tomorrow, I'm not going to go ahead and stoke it. It has a lot of time. She'ein kol halayla v'hayom day lehem. And it's not comparable to the beans. I wanted to remember we spoke about the beans. We said the beans take over 24 hours to be ready. So since the beans have over 24 hours to be ready, so therefore we are afraid that if you put the beans, that's how Rashi learned, that you put the beans on before Shabbat, you want it to be ready for Saturday night, Motzei Shabbat. And we're afraid that you might come to stoke the coals to get those on Shabbat because you want to have it ready for Saturday night. Like we said, you're having a nice Malava Malka Saturday night, right? There's a mitzvah to honor the Shabbat by escorting the Shabbat, when the Shabbat clean that leaves, the nice meal. So you might come to stoke the coals to get those beans ready. Now, Nathan yesterday reminded me about the beans, and I said, I did my homework. I'm a day late. I'm giving him the assignment. I found something fascinating. I found that we learned the Gemara with Rashi's explanation, but there are others that have a total different understanding of the bean story. So in the Siman Reish Nun Daled Sif Chet in the Shulchan Aruch, listen to what it says over here. It says in Shulchan Aruch, you cannot fill up, a person should have a pot of beans and put it into the oven before Shabbat. Why? So they're learning, this is based from the Rambam, Maimonides explanation of the Gemara, because they are total opposite. The type of beans, I presume there are different types of beans. Certain beans, I'm not an expert on beans. I presume there's certain beans that take a long time to cook. But these beans, the Rambam, the Gemara is talking about, according to this explanation, are the type of beans that cook very fast. It doesn't need so much cooking. And you might come to eat it right away, the beans. You're going to eat it Friday night. And therefore, even though you did not cook it at all, it wasn't cooked at all, you put it in late Friday afternoon before Shkia, before sunset, so you're going to say, okay, it's raw beans. I'm not going to come to stoke it because no, the answer is these beans, even though they're raw, these type of beans take very fast to be ready to eat. And therefore, as a concern, what's the concern? Even if I put it up late in the day, Friday, I might come to use it Friday night. I can eat it Friday night. So therefore, they're like other foods. Just like we said, if you have other foods that the cooking began a certain amount of time before Shabbat, not that you put it up raw, not that it was raw right before Shabbat. See, but if already a certain amount of the cooking, let's say it started a quarter, it was 25% cooked before Shabbat. So for food that's only 25% cooked and on the fire before Shabbat, we're going to be afraid that you're going to come to stoke the coals. And therefore, this is the story with the concern of these beans, meaning the beans are the exception to the rule. It's a type, meaning depending on the type of food, the Gemara is saying certain things that it's going to be ready much faster. Therefore, you not be able to put up even raw beans right before Shabbat. So according to this, to our question of what it means, the full pot. See, even if it's a full pot of beans, but it doesn't take long to cook these beans. Say it again. I mean, that's the question. How do we make? But at least if the beans, to say we're going to make a gzeira on other beans, I don't know that we can extend the fence. But the fence here is if you have beans that are called kalei habishul, very easy to cook, and it doesn't take long. So even if you put it up raw right before Shabbat, will be a problem because you're going to use it Friday night. If you're going to use it, you might use it Friday night. You're going to might stoke it to get it ready faster because it's not like the meat that when you put it up raw before Shabbat, it's not going to be ready till the next morning. These are very fast to the Chafetz Chaim in the Bir Halacha, he quotes, so he quotes the Mishnah Berurah, and he brings your discussion, by the way. The Chafetz Chaim talks about, is it all beans will have the same law, or is only specific beans that are fast to cook? So there's a discussion about that. And he also touches on our Rashi and our Gemara, how Rashi learns our Gemara differently than the Rambam. Okay, I want to wish everyone, I'm gonna be away. Thank you very much. And Rabbi Kanarik will be here tomorrow. So he married the great-granddaughter of Moshe Feinstein. He's been here before. He's wanting David, and hopefully everyone will come and be on the Zoom. He's making his efforts to come. For everyone equally, please make your efforts to come as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rabbi. Have a great trip.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Simon. Good to see you. I'm following your footsteps.